This is Never Close the Inquiry with Nick Hagan. Welcome to Never Close the Inquiry, where I aim to demystify the right for the left and the left for the right, where if you come as a conservative, I want you to leave knowing a little bit more about liberals. And if you come as a liberal, I want you to leave knowing a little bit more about conservatives, with the whole idea that over time we'll create better conversations, better relationships, better arguments, and maybe 80 or 90 more steps down the road, a better country. Benjamin Jolley is an independent pharmacist from a family of independent pharmacists. He makes his views on pharma policy known through his Substack newsletter, Ramblings of a Pharmacist. Ben and I have known each other since kindergarten, if not before, and I had him on to discuss from a pharmacist's perspective the Byzantine bizarro world that is our pharmaceutical industry. So the reason I wanted to interview you is because I feel like the average American honestly does not know a ton about how the pharmaceutical industry works.
Yeah.
And I would say that for myself, despite the fact that I spent 5.5 years at my law firm representing Endo Pharmaceuticals, which is, one of the larger domestic, or largely, it's an international pharmaceutical manufacturer.
Yeah.
And I still couldn't really tell you anything about pharmacy benefit managers, anything, and also despite the fact that in undergrad I worked as a delivery driver at University Pharmacy for 2.5 years, and I still couldn't tell you about how the business model for pharmacies work, about what PBMs do, and all that.
Sure.
So if we could start with kind of a summary of literally how the business works.
Okay, that sounds like the next 3 hours. Let's do it. All right, cool. Sure. So I guess there's a lot of different players in the pharmacy market, and we add more all the time because there's as my coworker puts it, there's always another middleman. Like when you think you've found all the middlemen, you find another one that negotiates deals between you and all of these middlemen. Anyway, but at core, pharmacies make money by selling pills. That's literally it. My revenue model at the pharmacy is how many pills did we sell times selling price minus cost of goods, right? It's straight retail as far as what the business model is for the most part. That's how we earn a living, how we pay our staff, how we pay rent. The difference between me and a grocer, though, is that I don't set the selling prices. For anything that's covered by insurance benefits, I can set a price that I'm saying hi, I would like this much money, right, all the way up here.
Yeah.
And then the insurer, through their pharmacy benefit manager, will say, well, that's nice. The most we're willing to pay for this is this much.
Okay.
And for 90% of prescriptions, that's how it's priced, is just they set an arbitrary price that is set by this middleman. And so then to make money as a pharmacy with these fixed selling prices that you don't control, you have to just be very clever at buying medications below that price, right? And the fun part is that there's there are three pharmacy benefit managers that control insurance benefits for about 80% of Americans. Depends on how you count that number, whether it's covered lives, or do they negotiate rebates for these people, or do they process claims for them? But it's somewhere around 80%. In other markets, in other definitions of the market, you can get as high as 90 to 95% there, or as low as 50 or 60% is in those big three.
Yeah.
But then on the purchasing side, so pharmacy, you've got buying drugs and selling drugs.
Sure.
On the purchasing side, you've got 3 wholesalers that sell 95% of the drugs.
And that's Cardinal, McKesson, and okay.
So and Cencora, exactly.
Yeah, and that's funny because them I know a little bit. Them I've dealt with their lawyers.
I imagine you have.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's who you probably would have dealt with at Endo. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they control 95% of the supply chain.
Okay. So they're buying directly from the manufacturers, and then they're selling on to individual pharmacies.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. In the case of my pharmacy, though, actually there is another middleman.
Oh, good. And is that because it's an independent pharmacy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So like if it was like Walgreens or something, they would just negotiate directly with Cencora.
Okay.
In the case of our pharmacy, we use a so-called buying group or a group purchasing organization. But for some reason that I still don't understand, they're allergic to the term group purchasing organization.
Okay.
They freak out when I say it.
Okay.
But anyway, they represent something like 4,000 independent pharmacies and they negotiate a global contract on behalf of those 4,000 pharmacies.
So the idea
with Cardinal.
standard collective negotiation.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And they take a small percentage fee, I think, for operating that, making sure that everyone's honest and that all of the money flows correctly. Like 1 or 2% is, I think, what they take. But that adds up to a lot of money when you're talking, gross sales for prescriptions before you account for all of the rebates that flow through the system and all the kickbacks that flow through the system. It's like $700 billion a year.
Okay.
Once you account for all of the kickbacks and so forth, the actual amount that the pharma industry gets is probably somewhere more like $350 billion a year.
Okay.
But, that's a very large gap.
Yeah. No, that's a huge gap. Yeah.
And
wait, so hold on.
go ahead.
When you say rebates and kickbacks that flow through the system, so you start out with $700 billion. When you say $700 billion, is that the total value of all pills sold in a year?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's at the buying end. Like when people buy, they buy pills, they pay for pills, or insurance pays for pills at a pharmacy, $700 billion a year, and that flows into the pharmacies and then kind of
into the
disperses through the
wholesalers
system.
and then to the manufacturers.
Yep.
And then the manufacturers pay back to the insurance.
Sure. Yep.
Right.
Okay.
And that's a big portion of that gap is that. But a good sized chunk also is to the wholesalers themselves.
Yeah.
I've heard that they take a cut, like a service fee from manufacturers for stocking the product in their warehouse, especially against smaller manufacturers, as much as 10 or 15%.
Yeah.
I don't see a penny of that.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, and I can tell you from, again, representing Endo that, and this is all public. I'm thinking about this. The amount of money that the value of the rebates and everything that goes to the wholesale distributors to Cardinal and McKesson. I mean, it's really substantial, like hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's just one company.
Right. One company and not the biggest company.
And not the biggest company by a long stretch.
No. A big company.
Right.
Billions of dollars
Right.
value, but nowhere near the biggest pharmaceutical manufacturer.
Not anywhere near Pfizer, Lilly.
No.
Right.
Yeah. No, we're close.
Yeah. So that's a very basic model is you've got drug is sold from manufacturer to wholesaler. Mm-hmm. Wholesaler sets, manufacturer sets a price that they sell it to every wholesaler. Mm-hmm. And then they rebate some portion of that back to the wholesaler based on so really you kind of have to talk about each relationship separately to get a good sense of what the overall market is. So there's manufacturer to wholesaler, and typically those are set under inventory management agreements where they say, hey, and there's reasons for all of this. The model for wholesalers 2 decades ago was something like, I'm just going to buy a bunch of drugs, and when you increase the price, manufacturer, I'm going to sell the drugs at a markup. But I'm going to buy a whole bunch right before I think you're going to take a price increase. So that I can earn a 10% margin on the product, right? Because you're going to increase the price 10%, so I'll be able to just buy it at the $100 and then sell it for the $110 price. That caused problems in the actual physical production of the product because wholesalers were buying a ton of product in December, and then they would just use their supply that they bought until May. And so if you're a manufacturer who's like trying to run a factory,
Right.
that
Just
presents a problem.
accumulating stuff. Yeah. Right.
So, so Cardinal and the other wholesalers redid all of their contracts to say, look, we're going to do it this way. I will tell you, manufacturer, exactly how much product I have in my warehouses at any given time. We're going to set some bounds of like what we expect sales to be. And I'm going to say that I'm going to keep at least a week and no more than 5 weeks of supply of your product on my shelf. So long as I stay in that range, you're going to give me 2-3% of the selling price of the drug. So if it's $100, you'll pay me $3. $1,000, you'll pay me $30, right? And then there's also some degree of like how quickly I pay you also affects the amount of rebate you'll give me. If I pay you faster, you give me a little bit more money back, right?
Yeah.
That's fairly standard stuff for distribution. So that's the general outline of that relationship. But I think there's also, in addition to that, just some degree of like, I'm big, you're small. You're gonna take a haircut, and you're gonna give me a little more profit, right? Because when you've got 3 suppliers that control 95% of the supply chain, any given manufacturer doesn't have anywhere near that kind of dominance in the market.
Right.
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 And so they'll say, hey, you're going to give me a larger cut. And then the wholesaler pharmacy relationship is a whole nother thing. And then the pharmacy to pharmacy benefit manager to insurer / to purchaser,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. Because those are 2 different things,
Yeah.
right? Like insurer, we think like United Health Group. We think Anthem. We think CVS.
Yeah.
But for a lot of the coverage of medications, of healthcare in the country, the insurer actually is just a administrator that has basically a bunch of blank checks from a union, from a employer, to say, hey, I've got all of these employees that you're going to cover. I'm going to deposit money into a bank account that I control, but I'm going to let you just cut checks and administer the payments to all the doctors, all the pharmacies, whatever. So that's a large fraction of the market.
Yep.
Insurers also have themselves a big chunk of business, like the Medicare market, at least for prescription drugs, is completely privatized. Medicare does not pay pharmacies for drugs themselves. Medicare pays United Health Group. United Health Group pays pharmacies. They pay CVS, they pay Humana, and those privatized companies pay pharmacies. That's not the case in the medical benefit side, where we're talking about doctors. Medicare directly pays physicians.
Yeah.
For like half of all the Medicare beneficiaries, but in drug benefits, those insurers have all of the control of the money for Medicare.
Yeah.
I'm kind of going all over the place here.
Yeah.
Stop me.
No, well, so, okay. So I'm trying to think.
I've like
No, that's okay.
speed run 15 different markets.
Yeah. So let's try to think about this in a way that would be digestible to someone
That's completely
completely has no idea. So, okay, so what it kind of looks like is that we have like almost an upside down triangle.
Yes.
Okay. So at the bottom of the triangle, we have the American patient that needs some sort of medication.
Yep.
Okay. And from the patient side, it's not, maybe it's not ideal, but it's not that complicated. You have your insurance, and then you go to the doctor, you get a prescription, because pharmacists don't prescribe, obviously, or within some narrow
Other than like
strictures.
vaccines.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Narrow limitations. So you go to the pharmacy, you pick up your medication, you might have a copay or whatever under your insurance, but you do that. Okay, you go home, take your medication, you're fine. Okay, but we've got 2 strands going up here. So on the one side, you have how the pharmacy got the medication in the first place, like how you got the thing, whatever it might be, the product, in stock. And then on the other side, you have how you're getting paid actually
Right.
for the medication that you have just handed over to the patient.
Right.
And so let's talk about the payment side for a second.
Sure.
Okay, so that's where we have the PBMs show up, pharmacy benefit managers. Okay, so you go up here, and the PBMs. Let's talk about PBMs for a second.
Okay.
Because there's some controversy surrounding PBMs.
For sure.
And I think some question, because basically anytime you have something that seems like it should be so simple, and there are so many different, not just companies, but types of companies and layers involved, it's a question like how much of this is actually not just necessary, but how much of this is actually benefiting the end consumer, and how much of this is benefiting the manufacturers, because we want them to continue to develop things that can help Americans. And and then I think if we're ordering like who we care about in this scenario, it's like patients, maybe manufacturers, then probably pharmacies. You obviously have some very large chains, but then you have a lot of small businesses that are performing a service. They seem like a necessary middleman.
Yeah.
And the rest of the middlemen seem less convincing.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
the GPO, you make an argument for that. That's a good argument. And then insurance, obviously, make the argument there. But let's talk about what function are the pharmacy benefit managers filling, and what's a famous pharmacy benefit manager whose name people might recognize?
CVS.
CVS. Okay, so you said CVS a couple times. Seems like CVS is doing a number of things.
Yes.
Okay, so CVS, they're doing a lot, because obviously you can go to a CVS and pick up drugs. Okay, so they act as a pharmacy. You already mentioned them as an insurer.
Aetna is their insurance division.
Aetna is okay. CVS owns Aetna.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
2017.
When I was at the University of Virginia, I had Aetna insurance. So you go. Okay, so CVS acquired Aetna in 2017. Okay, so they were for 1 year. Okay, and then in between the insurance and the pharmacy, you have pharmacy benefit managers.
Correct.
And CVS is also doing that.
Yes.
Okay, and when we're talking about CVS, are they kind of a market unto themselves because they're just doing their own stuff?
They participate in the broader market as a pharmacy.
Okay.
Right, but then they also sort of are their own market. They have
fully integrated vertical.
I mean, if you look at CVS,
Yeah.
as a case of like, what are all of the players?
Yeah.
CVS Pharmacy is a pharmacy.
Yep.
CVS Caremark is the PBM.
Okay.
Okay. Aetna is the insurer. Caremark Specialty Pharmacy is a specialty pharmacy that handles. Specialty pharmacy is a made-up concept that small pharmacies can't handle expensive drugs.
Okay.
You can think about that as long as you want, but basically it says this drug is expensive, it's complicated because it's expensive, therefore it has to go to my pharmacy.
Right.
You can't do it, little pharmacy.
I could see the only way that would make sense off the top of my head, and you'll be able to tell me if I'm right, is if there's a drug that's very expensive and is very rarely needed and is not something that as a small pharmacy you'd necessarily keep in stock, but that also might be needed very quickly. So like a large company could kind of float that and carry it.
I mean, basically,
is that the argument?
That's the basic argument, but the needed very quickly kind of breaks down really fast.
Okay.
When you think about it, because these are mail order pharmacies that typically have turnaround time of like 10 days.
Got it. Okay.
So we're not talking like Amazon delivery time. We're talking like 10 days. I mean, there are whole.
This is not like you could go to your CVS and pick up this.
No.
Okay. All right.
No. I mean, like I can get all of these medicines or almost all of these medicines from my wholesaler next day.
Yeah.
So I like from a turnaround time standpoint, I could have a faster turnaround time than a mail order could have.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make sense for the bottom line of a vertically integrated company.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And so they say, this is a special drug. It's very expensive. We're going to do it in-house. And so they control that entire market. I mean, CVS Specialty Pharmacy by themselves has about the same revenue as the 10,000 CVS retail pharmacies.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wait, and so are they doing?
And they dispense like 1% of prescriptions.
Wow. And so are they doing that by virtue of just like that's their own choice, or do they have some sort of regulation or law that's permitting them to do that?
There's a whole series of things. I mean, mostly the regulations in this market, in like the pharmacy value chain here.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, your two diverging paths. I like to refer to these as the value chain and the supply chain.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Supply chain is where we actually supply medicines. Value chain is where we supply value, or dollars.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a series of choices by a lot of people that's influenced by the major players in the market.
Yeah.
All of the major PBMs do this, for what it's worth. So CVS has Caremark Specialty Pharmacy.
Okay.
United Health Group is one of the other big PBMs. Their PBM is called OptumRx.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I've seen it on an insurance card. Had United when I was at my law firm in New York. Okay.
There you go. So, yeah, OptumRx.
So United is another one where they're an insurer and they have a PBM. Okay.
And they also have a specialty pharmacy.
Oh, good. Okay.
OptumRx Specialty Pharmacy.
Yep.
And they also actually have a series of, a smaller set, but a series of retail pharmacies as well. Genoa Healthcare is theirs. It's relatively small, but it's not particularly small. It's bigger than any of the chains that I regularly see outside of the CVS, Walgreens space.
Say Genoa.
Genoa Healthcare.
Okay.
Yeah, they mostly serve like specialty, like psychiatric clinics, that
Got
kind
it.
of thing.
Is it the sort of thing where they'd have a location in Salt Lake, or is it in?
I think they do.
Okay.
They're more like a closed door type of situation where like you
Got it.
you become a patient of theirs by virtue of being a patient of like a doctor's office.
Yep. Okay.
Rather than just like you walk in and say, "Hi, I would like a prescription."
Right. Okay.
That's my understanding, at least. I could be wrong about their actual business model, but they are owned by Optum.
Got it.
United Health Group also owns like 10,000 physicians.
Okay, so we've got a number of vertically integrated companies, but back to this fundamental question:
what is a PBM?
What is a PBM? What do they do?
Okay, so the original PBM was what we now call CVS. It was called PCS, Prescription Card Systems.
Okay.
I think they were based in Arizona, but the general concept was this: health insurers, unions, employers wanted to offer prescription benefits to their employees, but people get a lot more prescriptions than they do times they go to the doctor. So, like, just the volume of claims that is submitted for prescriptions is so much larger than, like, you go to the doctor maybe 1, 2, 3 times a year. If you're taking a chronic prescription, you take that one prescription 12 times a year probably.
Yeah.
Unless you're getting 90-day supplies, then it's still 4 times a year. That's still more than your doctor's office. And if you're taking a complex regimen of medicines where you've got, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, the most I've ever seen in my career is 52 prescriptions for one person. But like the volume of claims just becomes incredibly unmanageable. Yeah. So we're talking like 80s. Okay, so we're talking Ronald Reagan is the president.
Yeah.
A little while ago. But their basic value prop was, hey, we'll deal with all the paperwork for all of these prescriptions for you. And so they would, and they started with just like paper forms that pharmacies would fill out, mail into them. But they were called prescription card systems because they had a prescription benefits card like you probably carry in your wallet right now, right? But it specifically just said, like, here's how much the copay is going to be. Just send us a bill for the balance. And so you'd you'd sign a contract with them saying the terms of your relationship, and then you would mail in these forms. And you'd collect the copay from the patient before you did, and then most of the time, at that time, you would just keep these forms in your drawer until you had a stack of them, send them all in at once. And they'd process it and send you a check. So that's that's at core. What a PBM is just how do you deal with the volume of claims.
Yeah.
But from there, you start to grow into a whole bunch of other things. Because when you start thinking drugs, there are prescription drugs in any given pharmacy. There's probably at least 3,000 stock carrying units
Okay.
of drugs. Across the entire space of how many possible drugs there are to get, there's over 100,000 so-called national drug codes.
Okay.
That's a lot of different things, and there's some capacity to limit cost by narrowing what you cover, right? Say, I'm not going to cover all 100,000 things. I'm going to cover just like one or two things in each treatment area.
Yeah. Okay.
And so, and then also you say, we're going to narrow the number of pharmacies that we do business with so that we can extract concessions from them and say, okay, you've got a nice business going here. How about we cut your revenue by 10%? But in exchange, the CVS, all of the business that's currently going to them goes to you, Walgreens.
Yeah.
And so there's this narrowing of networks that happens that allows them to squeeze value there and theoretically pass that along to the employer who's hiring them or the insurer who's hiring them. And I'm talking about this as though these are separate companies, right?
Yeah.
Because the integration of PBMs into insurers is a recent phenomenon. Like Express Scripts and Cigna became one company. I think 2015, if I remember the numbers right. United Health Group bought what is now Optum Rx like 2012 or thereabouts.
Yeah.
And CVS bought Aetna in, I think, 2017. So that vertical integration is really just in the last decade. Before that, these were completely separate companies. And so far as like actual operations, they sort of still operate as separate companies. I've known people who work at United Health Group, and they describe the company as basically two separate companies, and the people who work in the United Health Group blue part, because the logo is blue, hate the people that work at Optum Rx, the orange people. And there's also the Optum people who are also orange, but are like analytics and like running medical offices. And they also all hate the pharmacy benefit manager group.
Okay.
There's like this weird, like they're one company and their financial results definitely demonstrate that. But like, so far as internal culture, they're sort of operated separately.
So let's just a couple of things really quick to make sure I'm understanding and just to kind of circle back. So when we're talking about SKUs, so stock keeping units, like different products, there are 100,000 potential different products. You know, they're only going to cover some certain percentage. To give people a concrete idea of that, from my perspective, like I have looked at a number of the drug codes before, having again represented Endo, and so like, you know, for example, within the opioid space, if you're just looking at generics, you'll have, in addition to like oxycodone, hydromorphone, oxymorphone, and whichever one I didn't say of those, you'll have those in combination with ibuprofen, and those in theory would do similar things.
Right.
And so a PBM might say, we're going to cover some percentage of those so we don't have to cover all of them.
Right. Okay. I mean, a common play might be to just say, we're not going to cover the ones that contain ibuprofen.
Got it. Okay.
Because their cost to pharmacies, and therefore, in part, their cost that is passed on to the pharmacy benefit manager is substantially higher than your Tylenol containing ones or your just straight product.
Yeah.
But then also, like, there's brand name products versus generic product. Like, this is another play is just to say, hey, look, we're going to just do anytime a generic is available, we're not going to cover the brand name drug anymore.
Right.
That's another way you can do this. And then another is what I described as rebates or kickbacks. They will freak out if you say kickbacks, but they're absolutely kickbacks.
Okay.
So, pharmacy benefit managers, again, this whole concept that like there are multiple different drugs that can treat the same thing.
Yeah.
And so you just say as an insurer, that's not on our list. We're not paying for it. And a key part of how that actually is able to happen is that in the 90s, late 80s, 90s, the pharmacy benefit manager industry established an electronic real-time transaction standard for transmitting these paper forms that were previously getting mailed in once a month or something. You now can send them electronically. And so when you hand a prescription to a pharmacist, or more likely your doctor sends one electronically to your pharmacy,
Yeah.
and the pharmacist is sitting there processing your prescription, staring at a computer screen, what they're actually doing is submitting a claim to your insurance and saying,
Right.
hi, I'm giving Nick 30 tablets of hydrocodone. I think it'll last him 5 days, and today's the day I'm doing it. I'm this pharmacy, and this is the doctor that prescribed it. Oh, and here's the diagnosis code as well. It's for like jaw pain or something.
Yeah.
And they've built automated systems to process those claims in real time without like any additional human feedback in most circumstances. And so if the product is approved, then they'll just send back a paid claim
Yeah.
and say, hi, pharmacy, we'll pay for this. You're going to have Nick pay $5 copay. We'll pay you $10. And then you get your payment like a month later.
Yeah.
But that real-time payment is a huge part of the ability of a pharmacy benefit manager to extract a kickback from the pharma company, because they're able to say, before I give you the product, I say, let's just give an example of your GLP-1s.
Yeah.
The very expensive Ozempic type drugs that we've got right now. So Ozempic is made by Novo Nordisk. Mounjaro is made by Eli Lilly. Trulicity by Durion. Like there's 11 different drugs in this class. 2 of them are more or less the market dominant ones, Ozempic and Mounjaro. But as a PBM, you can go say, hi, Eli Lilly, Mounjaro manufacturer. That's a nice drug you've got there. It would be a shame if no one could get it.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
And so you say, look, it's you or Ozempic. We're not covering both.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to need you to give me some kind of kickback
Yeah.
for covering your product instead of the competitor product. And the big PBMs claim consistently that more than 90% of the kickbacks that they receive, and like their most recent claim is like 97% of the kickbacks that they receive, goes back to the ultimate payer for the medication. So if Jolley's was paying United Health Group to insure us, and then they're paying OptumRx to negotiate that, theoretically 97% of that should come back to me. It doesn't to smaller businesses. I know that much. The evidence is mixed as to whether it goes to larger businesses. It definitely seems to flow back to Medicare. But anyway, so you get this, and this is, like, importantly, this is different from a negotiation between an insurer and like a hospital,
Okay.
right? Because an insurer and a hospital will have negotiations over price for a childbirth or for an open heart surgery, right?
Yeah.
But the way that they handle that, it just becomes a reduction in price, right? So if you go to the hospital and you had an open heart surgery, and let's just say, for sake of argument, it's $100,000 is their charge, and your insurer negotiated that down to, let's say, $50,000. $50,000 then becomes the basis for your copay. Maybe you have a $3,000 deductible, and then and then like 50% coinsurance or something like that. So you would pay the first $3,000 of that $50,000.
Yep.
And then you'd pay 50% of what remained. That would be a really horrible
rough.
plan.
Yeah, 23,
that'd be a horrible
23,500.
plan.
Yeah.
But
Oof.
but like that's actually not that far off from some Affordable Care Act plans.
Noted.
The bronze plans on the Affordable Care Act have like a $12,000 out of pocket maximum now.
That's pretty rough.
Yeah, maybe more than that. And that's like per individual. If you have a family plan, it's even
That's
double
really
that.
rough. Okay.
Anyway, but that reduction in price though becomes the basis against which we calculate your copays.
Yeah.
In the pharmacy space, that is not how it works. The $100,000 price is the basis of your copay. And then the rebate comes back to the insurer afterwards.
Yeah.
But when they calculate the copay, so Mounjaro's like $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
If you have a $3,000 deductible, that means you pay $1,000 for 3 months.
And then finally you're
And
good in
then
April.
you start getting copays,
Yeah.
right? Maybe you pay 25%, now you're paying only $250, and then you hit your out-of-pocket maximum eventually, and then it finally goes to zero. But but in those first 3 months where you're paying $1,000, $1,000, your insurance may have negotiated a 50, 60% rebate with Eli Lilly. And so you'll pay $1,000 to the pharmacy. I'll pay just shy of $1,000 to my wholesaler, who will pay just shy of that to the manufacturer, who will then cut a check back to your insurer for like $500.
Mm-hmm.
And so your insurer in those first couple of months
Holy cow.
is paying negative money for your prescriptions,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Yeah, they're just making money off it.
Yeah, they pay negative $500 for the first couple of months. After that, they're paying $700,
sure.
and then they're getting back $500. So they're actually paying like $250. Mm-hmm. So when your plan says you pay 25%, once you account for that rebate, you're actually paying like 50%.
Yeah.
Right? And
that's interesting.
And like I will note here as well, the United States is the only country in the world that has a system like this where we monetize these discounts.
Yeah, this is so. First, a couple of general thoughts. One, this is a very confusing industry.
Oh yeah, deliberately.
Yeah. Okay. So very, very confusing, and you have some very big companies that have figured out some very smart ways to make money. What you're saying, like these are pretty obvious ways to make money. Like that's great. Like if two companies can make kind of similar products, serving similar populations, and you can go and tell them once, like, yeah, well, no, we'll make sure we'll only cover you guys if you give us a ton of money. Right. That's a great deal.
Right.
Good dealing.
Yeah.
But like you can see how this does not necessarily benefit. I am not following how this would benefit. I can see you can make an argument for the manufacturers. Like you can make an argument for the manufacturers, and we do want the manufacturers to do. I mean, obviously, manufacturers have some issues, but generally speaking, there's a societal good in the sense that they develop drugs.
Right. And we want more. We want the next Ozempic to exist.
Yeah, we
right?
do. We want the next life-saving drug and life-bettering drug, all that. And then we really care about benefits to patients.
Right.
And everyone will say they want medication, medical services and medical products to be cheaper. Mm-hmm. This system does not seem like it's designed to produce the lowest prices for the best products.
Correct.
Okay. So what's happening in other countries? Because it's not, and we should note, to the best of my knowledge, it's not like other countries are doing things perfectly. Like I don't
absolutely
think,
not.
I think the United States still probably leads, and perhaps by some significant margin, in innovation. So on the manufacturer's side, we're probably still doing that better. But in terms of cost to patients, it seems like we are not doing quite as well.
For sure. I mean,
Okay.
so I guess that there's a couple of measures of innovation.
Yeah.
One is just like how many new drugs get approved in our system.
Yeah.
And like we definitely have more new drug approvals in the United States than in Europe, than in other countries. But also like once a drug gets FDA approval, it's a proven product, right? So it's not. So it's only marginal cost to introduce that product into the regulatory apparatus of other countries. Like it's
Right.
it becomes a public good basically at that point.
Yeah.
The hard work and effort to develop a drug
Yeah.
is substantial, but once it's there, it's like finding a uranium vein or
Yeah.
something like that, or a gold mine. It's now generally known.
Yeah.
And so like we lead in innovation, like, yeah, we get more new drug approvals, but those drugs get out to other countries not very long after they get to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
The United States still probably contributes an enormous fraction of any given pharma company's revenues because the selling prices here are higher.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is like in most other countries, this same function is still a thing. Like if you're gonna not have just first party payment for drugs, someone's gonna do something like this.
Yeah.
In most other countries, this kind of role is taken on by some kind of public body, whether that be like part of the National Health Service in Britain, or whether that be the public insurance system in France. And so they make these same kinds of assessments and say, no, we're only going to cover this, not that.
Right.
And but they do it on a national scale in a democratically accountable way rather than a shareholder driven way, right? And so these assessments are made in a different way. They still probably land on about the same assessments because, Mounjaro is all evidence that I've seen suggests that Mounjaro is a slightly better drug than Ozempic is. Like it has slightly better weight loss, slightly better blood sugar control.
Yeah.
So you're going to land on that one, even if it's a little bit more expensive in most cases. If it's a lot more expensive, no, you're going to go with Ozempic and you're going to use the two against each other. But like they don't monetize the discounting. It just the discount that they negotiate from whatever the manufacturer wanted becomes the price that everyone pays.
Yeah.
Including pharmacies, including patients. Like that becomes the price, and then you add, whatever service fees out of the middle for the wholesaler to distribute the product, for the pharmacy to dispense the product to the end consumer. But like, it becomes instead of this process of we're going to start with an incredibly high price, and then we're going to discount from there. And we're going to monetize that discount so that it becomes a payment rather than just a reduction in price. That's a very big difference between the United States pharmacy benefit manager system and every other country.
So, that's interesting. How long have PBMs been around?
I think the first one was founded in the late 1970s.
Okay, so they really haven't been around very long.
No.
So what was there prior to the advent of the PBM?
First party payment. You didn't have prescription drugs covered by insurance.
Oh.
Yeah, you would just go to the pharmacy and you'd pay for your drugs. And it's actually interesting. Yeah, it's actually really interesting when you talk to older doctors about this.
Yeah.
Because they'll describe, especially like older doctors that like are in private practice, don't work for someone else, so they're like are still allowed to talk to pharmaceutical manufacturer representatives. Because like the reps will come in, and like this one physician I talked to described it this way: 40 years ago, the reps would come in and say, "Hey, we got this great drug. It's fantastic. It'll do all of these wonderful things for your patient, and it's only $50 a month." Now they say, "We've got this great drug. It's fantastic. It's on the list of covered drugs with your patient, with almost all of your patient's insurance, and we've got this coupon that'll make it $50 a month." And so it's like, wait a second. And like PBMs argue, we reduce the price of prescription drugs. And like, to some degree, that's true. To some degree, it's also like, wait, why am I paying $1,000 for these
Right.
drugs when it
Yeah.
was $50 for like all of these drugs? But I mean, there's a number of reasons for that are separate. But like from the perspective of a physician who's writing these, like the sales pitch is still, it's $50,
Yeah.
and $50 is a lot less money today than it was,
Yeah.
right? And so, but like, and the reason that there's reasons for that, like there are a number of studies of like persistence after someone starts a medication, that if the copayment is more than $50, the number of people who will keep taking it after 2 months is dramatically lower
No
than if
kidding.
it's below 50. Like
People,
it's
the
a Schelling
$50
effect.
is a magic number.
Yeah,
People are like, yeah.
oh gosh, $50 a month. Whoa.
Yeah. Right.
But like $100 a month. Oh my gosh.
yeah.
$50 a month. I guess.
I could do it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other thing. Like there's this whole fascinating system of coupons that
Yeah.
manufacturers will say, hey, I know your insurance has this copay of like $500 for your drug, but I'll pay $450 of that for you.
This is the most confusing industry I've ever encountered.
It is so like you've said that a couple times.
Yeah.
It's deliberately that way.
Right.
Right? This is not a mistake. This
Yeah.
is not just random happenstance. It is, as one of my mentors, colleagues, friends, nerds puts it, his name's Antonio Chacha. He says, with mystery comes margin.
Yes.
Good line, right?
Yeah, that's a great line.
And so when you look at this market and you're like, this is so confusing, it's confusing for a reason, because that serves to give more money
Yeah.
to people who understand the
when
system.
something, yeah, no, and I mean in two ways, because one, when it's confusing, then you can get away with more, and you can,
Right.
yeah, and then two, when it's confusing, it feels like the people that are making money are adding value,
Right.
because I don't get it.
Right.
So if they get it, they must be adding value.
Right. Exactly. I mean, that's how like that whole specialty pharmacy thing came to be, is like prescription drugs, cost-wise, follow a power law distribution. Okay. So most prescription drugs are very inexpensive, to the point where like my total payment for some drugs is like 32 cents for a 90-day supply. I kid you not. I can show you the
It's
screenshots.
tough to keep the lights on with that.
Right. And then you get this like steady distribution of like 30 cents and then like $5, $10. And then a very small fraction of prescriptions will have these enormous costs.
Yeah.
And from the pharmacy's perspective, there's also a lot of margin in a very limited number of prescriptions. And so you keep the lights on by pulling the slots and hoping that you get the less than 1% of prescriptions that pay like $1,000 above
Yeah.
your cost.
Yeah.
And then you hope that that averages out to your average cost per prescription. Like this is literally how pharmacies get paid.
And you know what's funny? I mean, what you're talking about with generics and branded medications,
Yeah.
that's what we'd call them at NO at least.
Right.
Like the business drivers are branded. Like if a pharmaceutical manufacturer loses exclusivity on something that's really driving revenue, like that'll undo the company. Like I did corporate bankruptcy, and the reason I worked for Endo is because they went through bankruptcy, and there were a lot of reasons they were in financial distress. One of the primary ones being years
opioid
of
epidemic.
opioid litigation. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. But the one that actually precipitated filing, like what finally got them to file, was losing exclusivity on one of their biggest selling products.
Was that the hydromorphone product?
No.
or-
They the hydromorphone. Are you talking about Opana?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they took that off the market actually in January 2017. After
I remember that.
Yeah.
I was working in the pharmacy.
Yeah. So yeah, they what they lost exclusivity on was it was not opioid related.
Got it.
But it had been driving such a huge percentage of revenue that they had these very high carrying costs from litigation and all these other things, and they were still able to do it because their revenue was very high, and then they lost exclusivity. Revenue dropped like a third, and that's when you file for bankruptcy.
Right. No,
And
that totally
yeah.
makes sense. I haven't thought about it from that perspective before, but like, yeah, I mean, like, just as a for example of something of like that dynamic, Lyrica is a medication used for nerve pain.
Yeah.
The day it lost exclusivity, the selling price to pharmacies of a bottle of Lyrica dropped from $700 to $7. That one day.
Yeah.
And then it
is
dropped
nuts.
further from there.
That is nuts. I didn't realize how big an impact it would be. It's because it seems like, intellectually before you've really thought about it, you think it's going to be this like gradual drop off. Like you lose exclusivity, that sucks. But then you have a while as, competitors kind of come into the business. It's like, no, they are, you will lose in that case like 99% of your revenue, or you'll lose
100% because it goes to the competitor
Sure.
who's selling it for $7.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
you lose. Yeah, you lose all of this revenue associated with this drug very quickly. It's oh man, and that gets us that's a totally separate issue because it's like ties into kind of patent law and what sorts of protections we want to give to these manufacturers that are taking on the risk to develop the drugs in the first place. But you can see how down the road that obviously affects the end seller, like what you're what you're getting. Yeah. Interesting.
I mean, so, and like this dynamic of like tiny profits to like literally we might make like 5 cents on it, and it costs us more to get a prescription. Like every piece of my job is monetized by somebody.
Yeah.
Like getting a prescription from a physician to a pharmacy electronically costs pharmacies 18 cents every time I receive a prescription.
How did that's like an email shouldn't cost 18
cents. I think
cents.
I get a rebate from that brings it down to like 10 cents per, but still like 10 cents every single time. And if they cancel the prescription, I still get charged the 10 cents.
Wait, so is that because there needs to be some sort of secure system on which? Okay.
Yeah.
They can't just like email it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that would,
I guess
HIPAA would be a thing, and also.
Sure. Okay.
So like there's value created there, but like it's monetized, and there are about 4 billion prescriptions processed in the United States every year. So. All right. That's a lot of money.
That's 400 million, and
right.
or if 18 cents, nearly 800 million. And okay,
right.
Wow.
And that flows to basically one company called SureScripts.
Good job, boys.
They're an interesting company as well. They're like formed from a coalition of the National Community Pharmacy Association, the National Association of Chain Drugstores, started a company called SureScripts that didn't have capitalization or something, or did, or was 2 separate words. Anyway, and then they merged with a company that was founded by CVS, Caremark. Caremark, it wasn't CVS at the time, and Express Scripts, which is the Cigna division. They formed a joint venture called RX Hub to do like benefit investigation stuff. And then those 2 companies merged to form SureScripts, and so their board meetings are fun.
I'll make a note. Become middleman.
Yeah, no, like literally. Yeah. That's the whole game. And then like when I transmit a claim to a PBM, I am charged a penny every time I say, "Hi, I would like to give this person this medicine." Yeah, that's a penny. Okay. To a switch company. One of the biggest ones is called Change Healthcare. They got bought by United Healthcare 3 years ago. Another one is Relay Health. They're owned by McKesson. And again, a penny every time I say, "Hi, I would like to give Nick medicine." How many
prescriptions do you run through your pharmacy in a year?
40,000, 50,000.
Okay.
So like it's not a ton of money.
No, but it's money.
But like when you're talking about these transactions where like my total amount paid is like 30 cents. Yeah. That starts to add up really fast, right? And then you got to pay the staff. Yeah. You've got to get the bottle to put the drug in. Right. You got to get the little baggie. The lid. You got to get the bag. You got to get the label to put on it. Yeah. All of that adds up to like $1 per prescription, right? Yeah. Just those like little tiny costs that you wouldn't account for if it was a high margin industry. Right. Yeah. Right. But like when you're getting paid 37 cents, it's like, huh. And like I actually saw a prescription couple days ago, a friend sent a screenshot of his screen that said he billed CVS and said, "Hi, I would like $15 for this blood pressure medicine for this person." And they literally sent back, "Okay, you can have 1 cent. And by the way, that's the patient's copay. We're not paying you a penny." Like, please collect 1 cent from Nick. Do all of this work and collect a penny from Nick. Oh, and by the way, we charge a 25-cent fee for processing the claim.
Oh my gosh.
Like, so it's a penny to send the claim,
Yeah.
and then they charge 25 cents to process it.
What this is all boiling down to, what it sounds like to me, is that if you want to get rich, owning an independent pharmacy is not the way to do it.
Yeah, no. And like, this leads to all sorts of fun, I'm going to say fun, consequences where United Healthcare describes independent pharmacies as like this hotbed of counterfeit product and like scams, which is mostly false. Mm-hmm. Like 99% false, but
not 100.
Not 100% false, because like there are, like, I have seen pharmacies fall prey to counterfeiting scams where, like, this pharmacy, I wrote about this on my blog actually. Mm-hmm. This pharmacy in California is selling an HIV drug, and the economics for HIV drugs for an independent pharmacy are upside down. They do not make sense. So I mentioned a while ago, the selling price from a manufacturer to a wholesaler on the invoice is called the wholesale acquisition cost, WAC.
Okay.
For reasons, pharmacies generally buy brand name drugs at a discount to WAC. That makes sense.
Okay. So basically, what you're saying, it's like, so the wholesaler ostensibly would be losing money on that sale.
Correct.
Okay.
Theoretically, and they will lie to my face and tell me that they are losing money on that sale. They're not, because they get the rebate on the back end of 5% or something. Anyway, but they will sell drugs, like HIV drugs are specialty products that are oftentimes forced to go to these specialty mail order pharmacies. Okay. They're very expensive. Genvoya is a very common medicine. It costs about $3,000 a month.
Okay.
It's a fantastic medicine. I mean, like, thinking back 30 years, HIV, 40 years, HIV was literally, you did not have a treatment.
Yeah.
Thinking about 30 years, you had a treatment, but it was like you had to take like 30 pills a day.
Okay.
Genvoya combines all of those 30 pills into 1 pill a day.
That's awesome.
It is incredible. And there's a lot of other medicines like that.
And like, you could take that and HIV would not materially impact your
Correct.
life. Yeah.
Yeah. You take that pill every day and you will have undetectable viral load. I mean, provided there's not like drug resistance because you didn't take it all the time.
Yeah.
But you take 1 pill a day and your HIV effectively doesn't
That's
exist.
amazing.
Right. HIV is just like blood pressure. You take a pill a day and it's under control. You can't give it to other people.
Yeah.
If you're consistent on taking it.
That's incredible.
You cannot give people HIV because you don't have virus replicating in your body.
Yeah.
Anyway, this medicine costs $3,000 a month, is like the WAC. Okay.
Yeah.
Pharmacies buy it at WAC minus a 2% discount. Okay. So like, anyway, so like $2,800 or something like that.
Yeah.
No, it's.
I mean, it'd be a little
quite
more than that. It's like 29 something, but whatever.
Anyway, so 2% discount.
Yep.
But then the price that PBMs will say, "Hi, we will pay you this," is like a 6% discount to the WAC. And so pharmacies lose like 4% every time they sell this drug. This doesn't make any sense.
No.
Right? It's screwed up. It's messed up. So this results in this wholesaler, in very strong scare quotes, approaches this little independent pharmacy in Southern California and says, "Hey, I'll sell you Genvoya for a 7% discount instead of a 2% discount."
Nice.
They're like, "Oh, this makes sense. This is how pharmacies are able to make money selling this drug." Right? Yeah. They buy it for 7% and they sell it for 6%.
Yeah.
Right? This makes sense.
Yep.
Turns out, they buy the drug, they start giving it to their patients.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the patients calls and says, "Hi, hey, that bottle of Genvoya you just gave me, it had Tylenol tablets in it. What's going on?"
Yeah. Valid question.
And so,
Gosh.
so the pharmacist is like, is this guy just trying to like scam me to get another bottle of HIV medicine? Like that
Right.
doesn't quite make sense. Why would they be doing
Yeah.
that?
Right.
And so whenever drugs pass through the pharmacy supply chain, there's documents generated that say this is the pedigree of where this drug came from. It went from this warehouse to this warehouse to this warehouse to you.
Yeah.
They're called T3, transaction history. And so he looks at this thing, and it says that the manufacturer, Gilead Pharmaceuticals, had sold the medication to a company in Puerto Rico called Druggeria.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had sold it to this Safe Chain Solutions, was a fantastic name for a company that's selling counterfeit drug. Safe Chain Solutions, who then sold it to him.
Yeah.
So he goes and calls Gilead Pharmaceuticals and says, "Hey, have you ever sold drug to Druggeria in Puerto Rico?" And they're like, "No." And he's like, "Oh, well, I've got a story for you."
Yeah.
And it turns out that that turned into a investigation by Gilead and the FBI where, anyway, I think it was $100 million of HIV product
Oh my gosh.
had been diverted through this counterfeiting scheme.
Yeah.
What they were doing is they would find people who had HIV and who were taking this medicine, and they would buy the empty bottles from them, put random pills in there, reseal it, close it, and then sell it to a wholesaler who was willing to buy it and say, "Yeah, this is legit product." And then the pharmacies would
Good
unknowingly do this because also like the manufacturer's label says dispense in original container.
Yeah.
Don't break the seal. Don't just give the patient the bottle. Don't open it. And so like the pharmacy's not going to catch it.
Right.
Um,
Gosh.
anyway, so like this is one of the ways that the upside down economics can harm real people.
Yeah.
And like, and so this is like where small business pharmacies can fall prey to scams like this, but also can be like the source of some scams.
Yeah.
Like there was this company a few years ago that like had this whole business model of just getting data of like what are all of the amounts paid for drugs across the whole country. And so they just said, "Hey, pharmacy, give us all of your information." And then they would just aggregate and say, "Oh, this drug right here, you make $3,000 on it if you dispense this one instead of this one." And so like very commonly prescribed medicine, metformin, as a for example, the vanilla metformin that most people get causes horrible like GI side effects, terrible diarrhea. Costs like $4 for a month's supply. Okay.
Not bad for diarrhea. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Controls blood sugar like phenomenally well.
Yeah.
It's still first line therapy, even though it has like this horrible diarrhea side effect.
Nice.
A manufacturer came up with like this fancy method of releasing it more slowly in the body that like dramatically decreased the amount of diarrhea. And they said, "Hi, this will be $3,000 instead of like $4."
Okay.
And there's your like massive profit driver, right?
Yeah.
And then they lost exclusivity, and so pharmacies were able to buy this drug for like $100 for a month's supply, and they could sell it for a substantial like for just a small discount from the $3,000 price.
Wow.
They could sell it for like $2,500, $2,700. Buy it for $100.
Yeah.
And so like this company that's looking at all of these different claims and saying, "Hey, if you can get a doctor to switch someone from vanilla metformin to Neapolitan metformin, then you can make, $2,700 a prescription.
Yeah.
And like, that's all fine and good, right? But that means that now the insurer has a ton more money they're paying out for metformin than they were before.
Yeah.
And there's only marginal benefit there of like some reduced diarrhea. My favorite example of these like scammy switches that pharmacies will go for, and like you kind of have to do this in the market today, or else your economics don't make sense in the pharmacy anymore. You don't have enough money to run, and you close. My favorite example though is Prilosec.
Okay.
There is so Prilosec has been on the market for like 20 years. It's been generic for basically my whole career. About a decade ago, a company took the active ingredient in omeprazole and said, omeprazole treats acid reflux. You know what else counteracts acid? Baking soda.
Oh, I saw this in one of your articles.
Yeah.
Go on. Yeah.
So they added a gram of baking soda to
Yeah.
omeprazole, put it in a capsule, called it Zegerid, and said, this is now $2,000.
Yeah. And it's omeprazole and sodium bicarbonate.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A gram of sodium bicarbonate. And so that gram of sodium bicarbonate makes the value of an omeprazole prescription go from like $10 to like $2,000. And like this is totally a scam, right?
Right. Yeah.
But like every pharmacy is like, well, what am I going to do? Like close my doors? I'm going to try and get some of this kind of crap, and like maybe it works a little bit better, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
And so like the overall thing here though is that like the downward pressure on price that pharmacy benefit managers have puts pharmacies in a position where, the phrase bad money drives out good, where if you are a normal operator who's just like trying to fill prescriptions honestly, not trying to get into any scams, you're going to go out of business because the prices have just been pushed down so far. And then the people who are going to survive in the market are the ones who have some kind of scam that they're running like this. And then they'll be able to buy out competitor pharmacies. And so it's just a tragedy to me. Like, I want to be able to run a pharmacy without having to sell people $2,000 baking soda.
Right.
Right? Like, that feels very wrong to me
Yeah.
to do that. So I try to stay away from it as much as I can. Thankfully, Jolley's has our compounding business.
Yeah.
That's, like, we set the prices on that. It's basically not covered by insurance, and it gives us a decent buffer against the ridiculously low prices that we see and, like, the outright losses that we see on a lot of brand name products. And so, like, brand name products drive a ton of sales for pharma companies, but for pharmacies, they drive a lot of sales and a lot of losses.
Fascinating.
Yeah, like there are pharmacy, like there is literally a company called Retail My Meds that assists pharmacies in keeping track of people who are taking expensive brand name drugs that the pharmacy loses money on, and they don't want to let go of the relationship with the person, but they don't want to take the sale because they will lose $50 on it every month. And so they will facilitate the pharmacy transferring that prescription to a mail order pharmacy or to a chain pharmacy. And then the pharmacy will then instruct the mail order to ship the filled prescription to the pharmacy so that you don't have to worry about it like boiling in your mailbox when you don't grab it right out of your mailbox right away.
Yeah.
And so that you don't have to and they'll like do all of the legwork of calling the mail order pharmacy, because like the mail order pharmacies that insurance companies own have basically a captured market. Like they don't have to care about your customer experience anymore.
Right.
Because what are you going to do? Not take your medicine?
Right.
Like you can get it from me or you can not get it.
Right.
But this company exists to like help pharmacies move business away from themselves. and they charge a monthly fee of like a couple $100. Like, and that makes sense
Yeah.
because you move
That's really interesting.
10 prescriptions away and you've saved $500 a month on your on your overall margin as the pharmacy, which, like, again, this makes no sense from like how people think the world works.
Yeah.
But it is how the world works. Pharmacies lose money every time they sell brand name drugs for the most part. Like,
Yeah.
and there are exceptions. For some reason, this insurance company pays a good markup on brand name drugs, so you keep those ones. But everyone else, you just go to Walgreens, go to CVS, go to.
That's so
It's really frustrating. Like, and
Yeah.
it hurts my soul to tell someone, hey, guess what? We lose money on this. Can you go to Walgreens?
Yeah.
Or something like that. But like, the alternative is that we subsidize their health plan, right? And that's not my problem.
Right.
And I'm not.
Well, it's not a good business decision.
It's not a good business decision at all.
Right.
Right. So it's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, all right. We've been talking for a while, and I feel like I know a lot more things about the pharmaceutical business. I do not necessarily have a lot more clarity about
Phase one.
works, but
Be a middleman. That's the general message.
Become middleman. Literally wrote it down. What are some reforms? Like,
Sure.
So if we've got this really confusing market, it's very difficult to survive as an individual pharmacy, an independent pharmacy or independent chain, and it is not necessarily maximizing the benefit to patients, and it's also not necessarily maximizing the incentive for manufacturers to invest in research and develop great drugs. What do we do to maximize the efficacy of the system? Yeah, to fix it.
So there's a lot of things.
Okay.
So first off, it's not just independent pharmacies. Like, Rite Aid went bankrupt and closed 2,000 pharmacies over the last 3 years. Walgreens lost 90% of their stock value over the last 3 years.
I just saw it.
And just
Wall Street
sold to
Journal's
Sycamore Partners.
Yeah, Wall Street Journal today. I haven't listened to it, but their podcast episode for the day is about the demise of Walgreens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and Walgreens is about to get Toys R Us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Poor Toys R Us.
So they're about to have that exact same experience, which it's kind of hard to picture how that can get worse.
Yeah.
Like, have you been to a Walgreens lately?
Not lately, I don't think.
I mean, the products are locked up in little plastic boxes in a lot of places. So, like, the convenience store part of it is not convenient.
Right. Yeah.
And the Walgreens around here, I'm friends with one of the managers here.
Yeah.
He tells me that 2 of the 3 Walgreens closest to us have only been open 3 out of 5 days the last month.
No kidding.
Yeah, they don't have the staff. They don't have people to open the pharmacies.
Yeah, that's a problem.
So, like, how can a private equity company make that worse? I'm not really sure.
That is funny that you mentioned, having all the products locked up and everything, because, having lived in New York City for a good while, you do kind of get used to that very annoying state of affairs where you need someone to help you get deodorant and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah, not optimal.
Though, speaking of New York, I learned today that bodega and boutique and apothecary are all the same word.
Really?
Yeah.
I couldn't have told you that.
Yeah, I didn't know that until today. I was watching
3 different languages?
Well, it's all Latin, but it's Latin to French, Latin to Spanish, Latin to English.
Huh.
Apothecary is apotheca, l'apotheca, bodega, boutique. All of those come from
No kidding.
Yeah.
All right.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. And they serve very different functions in
yes.
today's world.
The phrases mean completely different things today.
Now, yeah.
But they're all the same word, apparently.
Huh, no kidding. All right, good to know.
Anyway, but yeah, so, like, what do we do about it?
Yeah.
Back to that, right? So it's not just little pharmacies, was my point.
Yeah. It's pharmacies that are not vertically integrated with companies that can sustain it.
Like,
yeah, okay.
CVS seems to be okay.
Yeah.
Their staffing model seems to be also very very lean and very stressful.
Sucks.
So like their retail pharmacies don't seem to be doing much better than Walgreens, but they're
Yeah.
part of the bigger entity
Yep.
that has
Can carry them.
can carry the enterprise, right?
Yeah. Okay.
But what do we do about it? So from my perspective, you pay pharmacies as service providers rather than as retailers. That's really the biggest thing that you do.
Okay.
This is how Medicaid actually pays pharmacies. So Medicaid is different from Medicare. It's different from TRICARE. It's different from employer-sponsored insurance.
Yeah.
Medicaid, fee-for-service specifically, so the state paying pharmacies directly, administers a series of surveys. One is called the National Average Drug Acquisition Cost, where they hire a company who then sends a survey to something like 5,000 pharmacies every month
Yeah.
and says, hey, send me all your invoices from the last month. Thanks. And then they take the invoices that they get back. And it's currently like a voluntary system, so the fact that it works at all is kind of remarkable. Like, no one's making anybody send these surveys in.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they take all of these invoices and then they say, okay, oxycodone, as your example that we used earlier, costs on average 15 cents a tablet. Lisinopril costs 5 cents a tablet. Olmesartan costs 10 cents a tablet. And so that becomes the basis of reimbursement to a pharmacy for the drug product that they give. Okay? And then they administer a second survey to pharmacies of, give me basically all of your books. And in Utah, that one is not optional. It is, if you want to be part of Medicaid, you send in your books.
Do you think that's good?
I think so.
Okay.
And so what they do is they take all of your costs. So cost of staff, cost of labels, bottles, all of the cost, like rent, all of the overhead costs. They take all of that, divide it by the number of prescriptions that a pharmacy does, and they come up with a cost to dispense per prescription. And they say, okay, here in Utah, I think it just went up to $11.37. They administered a new survey, found there was some inflation over the last couple of years. It went from $9.99 to $11.37. So when I bill Medicaid pays me the national average drug acquisition cost per pill plus $11.37 a prescription. That's it. So, so whatever the drug costs the average pharmacy. So that means that like if I buy better than average, I'm going to make a little more. If I buy worse than average, I'm going to make a little less, right? So there's still some incentive for me to try and minimize my costs, and that'll drive the average down over time. So average cost of drug plus average cost to dispense a prescription, that doesn't really leave any margin for the pharmacy, but that accounts for all of the costs to run the place, right?
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so I think that like you take that and you just add a very small amount more, like $1 more or something per prescription, and you just say, this is what you have to pay for drugs, and just tell everyone in the whole system, this is how you will pay pharmacies. And that removes a lot of the incentive to play weird games with sodium bicarbonate, right? Because I'm getting the cost that I need to operate the place.
Yeah.
And it means that I make more money the more prescriptions I dispense, right? It means that I have the resources to, like, I have the financial resources to be able to pay my staff and actually give, like, equitable care to each person. Whereas, like, under the current system that is not Medicaid, actually did the math one time, and if I told 90% of our customers to pound sand, we would make more money, and I could fill all the prescriptions myself in like 2 hours a day, and then just like go deliver them to the person's house and give them like extremely high touch care.
Yeah.
Like go sit in their house for like an hour and like, talk about all of their drug problems and whatever. We would make more money. Right.
That's bizarre.
Like I mean, the pharmacy's revenue would drop dramatically, but not that but we would keep all of the highest margin people.
Yeah.
And
and your costs would
and we
plummet.
would go from, and we wouldn't need to have like a 3,000 square foot space.
Mm-hmm.
We'd need like 100, like 200 square feet or something, um, and a car.
You just need a trunk.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And a
so,
good laptop, Wi-Fi. Yeah.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
So like, I did the math on this one time, and I was like, if I was evil, that's what I would do.
Yeah.
But like, that's what a specialty pharmacy is.
Yeah.
Except that they don't give very high touch care. They just
Mail it.
mail it.
Yeah.
And they spend a lot of time on phone calls with people to berate them about taking their medicine on time. And they send
Smart.
letters to people and say that that's good care. There's all sorts of ways that you can say, I'm a really special pharmacy, and have it be like check boxes for an accrediting body. Anyway, but like, so to me, that's the way that you solve so many problems in the system.
Mm-hmm.
Is you just say, we're going to pay the average cost of a drug plus the average cost to do business,
Mm-hmm.
and a very small amount of margin. And then that gives some room for pharmacies to then be able to service patients in a different way rather than just lowest cost per pill, the end,
Yeah.
which is the current system. It's, I want to give as many prescriptions out as I can, right? But also, like, it also means that I don't have these very high margin drugs anymore because I'm just getting paid a flat amount across the board rather than like nothing and everything in this small fraction.
Yeah.
But it also means like when states move to this system for their Medicaid programs, because not every state does this. Some let their Medicaid be privatized. Utah is half privatized.
Mm-hmm.
Really weird. I was testifying on Capitol Hill recently. I wasn't personally testifying.
Our Capitol
Yeah,
Hill?
our Capitol
Yeah,
Hill saying,
okay.
"Hey Utah, let's change this." I didn't actually personally testify. I just wrote all the talking points for my friend,
Nice.
who testified and said, "Hey, we should shift to this across the board instead of being half privatized, half not.
We should be fully public. Is what
We should
you're
be fully public,
saying. Yeah. Okay.
and just do it all this way." And anyway, every state that's done this, West Virginia, New York, Kentucky.
So this is not. This is just the states you mentioned. We're not talking just liberal states.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So like Kentucky did this 2 years ago. West Virginia did this like a decade ago. New York did this 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They went to public system where they paid pharmacies on this basis. Pharmacies like all love this because they're like, okay, cool. I understand how I make money, because before they did not. It was just like, oh, cool, pulling the slots in Vegas and I made some money. Cool. Now it's like, okay, I make $11 a prescription, basically, plus or minus a little bit.
What was the impetus for making that move in West Virginia and Kentucky?
It saved them a ton of money.
Okay.
That's what I was getting at, is
Yeah.
every state that's done this has saved a boatload of money. West Virginia saved $30 million the first year.
No kidding.
New York saved, I think, $500 million.
Oh my word.
And so every time a state
All right.
moves to a system that like doesn't have mysterious profits flowing places,
Yeah.
they save money.
Yeah. Right.
Because like this whole pressing down the prices to where I'm getting like 30 cents a prescription, it doesn't reduce cost. It just makes it look like we're reducing cost because, man, we're paying nothing for oxycodone.
Yeah.
But the trend is that always there's way more money in total in that little fraction
Yeah.
of prescriptions that are in that, and a lot of that money flows to the vertically integrated company.
Right.
The FTC put out a report about this and found that just a few months ago, it was their second interim report on PBMs of their 6B study. Is that not a wonky
Thanks,
name?
boys. Yeah. Nice work.
But they found that like on imatinib, Gleevec is a drug that Mark Cuban really likes to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
When it lost exclusivity, the manufacturer had a selling price on it of $11,000 a month
Nice.
for 30 pills.
Wow. Okay.
I can
Holy
buy a
crud.
bottle of generic today for $30. Okay. But the manufacturer suggested retail price, which in pharmacy we call average wholesale price for historical reasons that don't make any sense anymore, because it's not an average, it has nothing to do with wholesalers, and it's not really a price except that it is. That the MSRP is still $11,000. And so when a pharmacy benefit manager goes to an employer, goes to a government program and says, hey, we'll get you a discount on imatinib, they're comparing against that $11,000 price.
Oh my gosh.
And so they'll say, we're going to get you a 50% discount.
Yeah.
We're going to save you $5,500 a prescription.
Yeah.
We're not going to tell you that it actually cost us
It's
$30.
$30. Yeah.
And we're going to charge you $5,500
Yeah.
for it. But like, this is literally billions of dollars flow in this exact way.
Yeah.
For drugs that used to be very expensive, aren't anymore on a wholesale basis, but are still very expensive on a actual realized price basis.
Yeah.
So like that goes away.
Mm-hmm.
And the person who's actually paying for all of this, which is you and me through our insurance premiums, really,
Mm-hmm.
The person who actually pays for all of the medications saves a boatload of money on drugs when you get rid of those $5,500 markups, because that is way more than you save on the couple of on the 37 cents versus $10.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, that to me is like the big fix. The other big fix from a public policy standpoint for all of this is that you just say, look, you're either on the I handle other people's money for a living side of the wall, or you're on the I sell people stuff, like physical products for a living side of a wall. And so, like, to me, I refer to this as the Glass-Steagall for healthcare.
Yeah.
So Glass-Steagall was a law from the Depression that said you can't be an investment bank and a community bank. You choose one side of the wall, you're on one or the other. For healthcare, I think that a lot of the problems that we see stem from the fact that an insurer owns a physician. An insurer owns a hospital or is a hospital in some cases. Select Health, Intermountain, right? And a PBM is a pharmacy.
Yeah.
Right. And so they are supposed to be, as a PBM, they're supposed to be an agent of the purchaser, an employer, a union, a health plan, to make sure that drug costs go down. But they themselves are also a pharmacy.
Yeah.
So they're a corrupt agent. Right?
Yeah.
Their incentive on this side is to sell as much drug as possible at the highest price possible. Their incentive over here is to keep the price as low as possible. Which one benefits the bottom line of the overall company more is who wins, right? And
Interesting.
And so that's like, so to me that separation is incredibly important. And similarly, United Health Group is also Optum Physician Group.
Yeah.
And controls the physician offices of over 10,000 physicians in the United States. I think it's actually worse than that. I think it's like 90,000.
It's a very high number.
It's like 10% of all physicians. Their ultimate employer or control entity, management group, whatever, is United Health Group. Like 10% of all physicians answer to United Health Group as their boss. And so that means that their incentive structure is very different as an insurer physician than it would be if they were just an insurer, right? So are they trying to drive costs down as an insurer, or are they trying to do more procedures, get more diagnoses on the books as a physician? The answer is question mark. It depends on the market. It depends on exactly the set of circumstances. But like that to me is a big public policy question that I think that's the big solution to me. And then the third one is to just stop worrying about value-based care. It's a scam. That's there's this whole, all of the people in Doge right now, all of the like higher up people that aren't named Elon Musk, all cut their teeth at Medicare in a organization called the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation, CMMI.
Yep.
And they created this monster called value-based care, where we say we will, instead of paying physicians for just seeing a patient, we will do like a bundled payment, and we'll put some of it on the line, and we'll turn the physician into like a baby insurer, and we'll make them receive a capitated payment, and like you just make the system way more complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Which again, who does that benefit?
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, those are my big three solutions, and like the whole value-based care thing comes into pharmacy as well. That's a whole nother conversation.
So it's really interesting. Okay, so last question.
Okay.
It's been, I think we gotta, this has been very good. Last question is, at this point in time, in the year of our Lord 2025, how possible do you think these reforms are, and how do you think they happen?
It's a good question. Elon killed one of these reforms. It was in the continuing resolution in December.
That was the Plan A that Republicans had.
The Plan A, the big package that was like, that Elon and crew decided was too long. Yeah. It had a whole package that would enforce a ton of reforms on the PBM industry.
Yeah.
It would have broken that whole like rebate thing where you pay $1,000 and they get a payment back. It would have said, no, you have to apply that. You have to calculate patient copayment against the net price.
But okay, so the silver lining there. Now, obviously, I'm sure that was a very dark day for those in the pharmaceutical world. It was tough point. But the silver lining there is that if it was in the Republicans' Plan A,
theoretically, it'll come up again this year.
Yeah.
Donald Trump has said all sorts of nasty things about pharmacy benefit managers.
Yeah.
He has said there are middlemen that are making so much money and no one knows who they are.
Nice.
And we're gonna get them. I think was his wording. So like he's all like, let's get the PBMs.
Yeah. So they're trying. I mean, the continuing resolution that they're trying to pass this week would fund the government through October.
This one does not have the PBM reform element.
So you're saying that realistically, what would happen is that this current resolution would by current I mean the one that they're going to try and get done this week, would fund the government through not through October, through September 30th, through the end of fiscal year 2025, without ever voting on a budget for fiscal year 2025. But
there we go.
Anyway, but then they would have a chance to go at it again for the next year. And realistically, that would be the next place that could show up.
Probably. I mean,
or most likely. Obviously, you could do it independently, but
I'm hopeful that we could get some kind of independent package across the board, because it's like, this is not a partisan issue. It's not a
independent packages are
right. They don't exist.
Right.
Thank you, Mitch McConnell, for killing independent packages. You have to do everything through reconciliation now.
Yeah, the best. Yeah.
Which means that reconciliation packages become
they're huge,
enormously long.
They're huge.
Like you do all of the markup work in committees.
Yeah,
and then you just inject that into the continuing resolution.
Yeah,
and that's how we do legislation now, which
is
super dumb.
I saw something that was funny. It was like trying to paint this almost as a silver lining, or maybe just as necessary context to understand partisanship in Congress, or how Congress works now. Because, like, obviously Congress passes fewer bills now than they did a generation or two generations ago. But pages of bills, that number hasn't dropped.
Right.
Which is somehow all the more frustrating. One, like, often laws are not quite as long as you need them to be, probably. Thanks to the lawyers for, making sure that things are very long. But, Yeah, it does seem like parties do a huge amount of what they do through reconciliation so they can avoid the filibuster. Although what the continuing resolution, they cannot use reconciliation. So part of the drama this week is that you actually do need Democratic votes.
Oh yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah. And, Democrats don't want to get hung with shutting the government down, so they probably will cave eventually. But we'll see what they're able to extract.
Right. Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
see.
so, yeah, it'll be a fun, classic
Yeah.
negotiation.
But I mean, this is not a new concept that like everything gets done through the budgeting process
Yeah.
instead of because like one of the most significant pieces of legislation in pharmacy is called OBRA 90.
Okay.
OBRA stands for Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1990.
Yeah, it's a great one.
That is
We've all got it memorized. Yeah.
that is like every pharmacist learns that in their law class where they learn about what are the
kidding.
significant like OBRA
Yeah.
90
Yeah.
did a ton of changes to how pharmacies operate. Like it mandated that pharmacists had to offer to talk to you about your medicine. When my grandpa was starting Jolley's Pharmacy in 54, the Code of Ethics for the American Pharmaceutical Association said, you shall not talk to a patient about what is in their prescription. Like you would literally have prescriptions that were just like Dr. Joe's formula number 5.
Yeah.
And it would not tell you what the medicine was. And the pharmacist was like explicitly prohibited by Code of Ethics from telling you what was in it.
Okay.
The-
That's
and
interesting.
over 90, like there was a like shift over the next 40 years from when Grandpa started the pharmacy to then, that was like, okay, it's okay to talk to people. Then over 90 said you shall. For Medicaid people, you shall talk to them, and for everyone else, you shall offer. But like, it was really frustrating to me to learn that like that is a generational piece of pharmacy legislation, and it was a budget piece.
Yeah.
This is not a new frustration. At
Yeah,
least
no.
not inside of my lifetime.
That's funny.
The independent packages, I guess, predates my my birth.
R.I.P. Okay, so that's one piece that was in the Plan A resolution for this last year. It got killed.
The bit about like splitting pharmacies and
Yeah.
PBMs as just separate entities, which like I think is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Senator Warren and Senator Hawley, Republican and Democrat, introduced a piece
A
of legislation.
populist Republican.
Exactly.
So the fact that Hawley supports it does not necessarily mean that a lot of other Republicans will.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, they introduced a piece of legislation very late last year, like December, called the Patients Before Monopolies Act, that would say, "Thou shalt choose one."
Yeah.
Be a
Which
PBM,
would require a
pharmacy.
number of existing companies to break up.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It would cause a breakup for CVS, for
Yep.
Cigna, for United Health Group, for actually several other companies as well.
Yeah.
They're definitely the dominant players, but like there's more
A
than that.
number of them. Yeah.
But that's that name, by the way, is Patients Before Monopolies, PBM. It's very cute and very clever. So like that exists, and there's other ways that you could get at this, like
Nice.
through like funding to the Department of Defense. You could maybe get at the way that TRICARE pays for medicines, right? Through the National Defense Authorization Act.
Yeah.
Through and also like at a state level, there are, again, states have done this in their own Medicaid programs. They can do substantial reform to their own public employees programs, which are big, right? And making these reforms can save states a lot of money and make pharmacies a lot more stable as service providers. And like that to me is, you were saying like pharmacies seem like necessary middlemen, and I think absolutely yes. Like middlemen aren't per se bad. It's when they add complexity without adding substantial value, right? That a PBM a middleman, slip of the tongue, becomes a problem, right? And so um, so like a pharmacy simplifies the process of making sure that you get the right drug,
Yeah.
right? Our job is to make sure that the right drug for the right person in the right dose, for the right length of time, and for the right reason, right? That is ultimately like what a pharmacist is supposed to do, and good luck doing that as a layperson, right? You
Right.
got 100,000 SKUs to choose from.
Yeah. Right.
So there's a reason why we have the pharmacist middleman, but like pharmacies are closing at an increasing rate right now. Walgreens' best estimate is that in this purchase they'll close at least 1,200 pharmacies. That's a lot.
That is a lot.
The state of Utah, where we are right now, 527 pharmacies in the state.
No kidding.
That's it.
Okay.
So 1,200 pharmacies closing is 2 Utahs
Worth
plus.
of pharmacy. Yeah. Right.
And I've documented just since January of last year. I think you read my article about pharmacies closing through September. I updated that. 3,200 pharmacies have closed nationwide since January of last year.
No kidding.
Through just now.
Yeah.
So over 15 months. And for context, there's like 60,000 pharmacies in the country. So that's like 5%.
Yeah. No, it's a material number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a number that you feel, especially if you're in one of the rural communities where there is no longer a pharmacy. Like,
Yeah.
if Jolley's closed, it would be a personal tragedy.
Yeah.
But like, there's a Macy's 2 blocks away.
Right. Yeah.
There's a Walgreens 5 blocks away. There's like,
Yeah.
you don't really feel it as much, other than like, I feel like we do a good job. I feel like folks appreciate the work we do. But like,
Yeah.
if Beaver Drug closed down in Beaver, Utah, there is no pharmacy for 65 miles.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And I know that guy, and like he has the same issues that I do, where some of the contracts are just materially upside down that comprise a large fraction of his business. And so like he's in a position where it's like, well, what do I do about that? How do I turn people away if like that's the right business decision? How can I feel good about that when the nearest pharmacy is an hour drive?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the alternative is like he closes and everybody drives an hour.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So to me, like that's a public health problem that we are having so many closures. It's a public policy problem because I think the core of this is just the poor incentives and poor design of the system that we've given to the middlemen in the market, the PBMs primarily, but also the wholesalers, also all of these others. And so this is a big deal to me. Like professionally, I'm a pharmacist. I have like a personal stake in this.
Right.
But also, and like my pharmacy that my grandpa started 70 years ago is affected. But like, to me, it's like, it's not just about my personal position. It's like, it hurts me to see people have the really poor experience that is so common across so many pharmacies, and especially the largest pharmacies that just don't give a crap. I mean, they're like, I'm on a couple of Facebook pages where like it's, this company sucks, right?
Yeah.
And they just tell these stories about like calling the mail order pharmacies help desk and saying, "Hi, I would like my prescriptions," and they have to call like 15 times to get their drug shipped to them.
Yeah.
And they document like, I spent 20 hours getting my cancer medication shipped to me.
It's awful.
Like that, like, and the only reason that they have to do that is because they can't use a local pharmacy for it.
Yeah.
Right? If they were able to use a local pharmacy, like they might have some frustrations, but like, you wouldn't have, like the pharmacy would not be in the position where they could say, "Hey, just wait on hold for 20 hours
Yeah.
over 6 phone
No,
calls."
I mean, I think, this is probably true for a lot of people, but I've been to your store, to your pharmacy. I've been to, other Jolley's locations. Obviously not totally connected, but like I've been to terrific independent pharmacies where even like if you do have some issue, your prescription's not there or whatever, like very easy to sort out because you're there in person, great customer service.
Buck stops with a dude who's there.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, it's just great experience.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. So it's, I don't know. It's just it's a big deal for me. And so I really care about these issues and I really want them to actually succeed, all these reforms that like I've talked about, changing the payment model so that it's like we pay pharmacies for the service they provide rather than for the drug, rather than as a markup on the drug, because that just doesn't work.
Yeah.
At least not anymore.
Interesting.
20 years ago it worked. Dad made a ton of money 20 years ago in the standard model of doing things where you're just marking up drugs. He made plenty of money. Mm-hmm. But things changed and margins got shoved down.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't make any sense anymore. And so, I don't know. It's like there's like 17 layers of middlemen that I haven't even talked about.
Well, nonetheless, this was hopefully for people, I think, a very good introduction to the morass.
Absolutely. Good description
of issues and just complications and how this is not the system is not set up to benefit the players that we really care about.
No, I don't think so.
Interesting. Well,
Pleasure.
Jolley, local Salt Lake City pharmacist.
Yeah.
Pharmacist from a generation of from a family
two generations
pharmacist. Yeah.
Before me, yeah.
Well, been great having you. Ramblings of a Pharmacist on Substack.
I think we rambled here today.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. And and this interview will be out soon. All right, and that was the interview. Thank you very much for listening. If you wouldn't mind, please do leave a review for the podcast. I believe those are important. And subscribe to the newsletter, which will be linked in the show notes or can be found at neverclosetheinquiry.substack.com. Thanks.